Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Living Systems Collaboratory. I'm John Crawford. I'm a professor here at UC Irvine in the School of the Arts. And today we're going to talk about how to approach this process of prototyping for art and design with the living systems perspective as a central theme. So I'm going to share my screen here so you can see this introductory part of the presentation. And Roxy, if you could bring that into the stream, that would be great.
John, I'm not seeing it in the screen share.
Okay, you're not seeing it in the screen share. Let's see if we can fix that.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, or good day.
For those of you who are just joining us, I'm having a little bit of a glitch getting started, but we'll be going in just a minute.
As I see some more of you jumping in, good morning, everyone. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes. As John mentioned, this is a stream as a part of the Living Systems Collaboratory, which is a program of the University of California, Irvine's Emergent Media DesignLab, as well as the Buckminster Fuller and habRitual's program, the Design Science Studio. The Collaboratory is supporting artists who are creating work that is exploring, embedding living systems into the way that we are perceiving our more than human world and our connection with it. And as we're seeing life as a unified whole inspired by living systems, there are so many blueprints that can help us as we are looking at our biological, cognitive, social, ecological, political systems. And so as nature provides the blueprints to support us, we are collaborating with artists and designers to amplify their work. And so we thank you all for tuning in, and we will be getting started in just a moment.
I think you should be able to see my screen share now.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Okay, great.
So welcome everybody to the Living Systems Collaboratory, and we'll give you a brief introduction of the topic for today and then dive right in. So my name is John Crawford. I'm a professor here at University of California, Irvine. I work in the School of the Arts and am an intermedia artist, as well as doing lots of research and teaching in that area at UCI. The Living Systems Art and Design Collaboratory, as some of you just heard from Roxy, is presented by these organizations: Buckminster Fuller Institute, University of California, Irvine Design Science Studio, habRitual, and our patron is Mansour Vakili, in partnership with lots of other wonderful organizations. So we are here to create an educational incubator for art in the Design Science Studio, and then the Living Systems Collaboratory is a way of bringing that out into the world in a way that makes art and design a central aspect of this idea of communicating the living systems concept. Thinking about what we've learned in studying the work of Buckminster Fuller, the time has never been more ripe for Bucky's vision of what he called the design science decade, and his vision to make the world work for 100% of life in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. It seems to me that we should have learned this lesson by now, but we're still working on it. Some of us are definitely ready to move in that direction. And the overall concept driving a lot of our work is this idea that we can find a reason for being by connecting the areas that are shown here in this wonderful Venn diagram. Some of you have seen this already. For those who haven't, we have some resources online that we'll share with you. So what I would like to do in this early phase of the Living Systems Collaboratory is bring in some ideas that I hope will be useful to people who are tuning in from outside the collaboratory, as well as those participating directly, related to how we can use speculative design techniques applied to prototyping of art and design. Or another way to think about it is that we're taking speculative approaches to developing art and design, and we're using some of the tools and techniques that were developed in a variety of contexts, a lot of it focused on product design. Design, in one sense, can be seen as solving problems, looking for ways to make the world better, solve existing problems, and approach communication and integration with technology and other human artifacts in a way that's more life-affirming. Where I believe that the art-making perspective can add a whole new layer to that is that artists really are not so much about solving problems. Our role is to find new questions. In other words, not so much to find the solutions, but to find deeper ways of thinking of and approaching the problems that we want to solve. And so as artists, we can bring in this questioning, this critical investigation. And I want to see us find ways that we can use some of these techniques in that regard. So I'm going to take a minute now and change my screen share so that you can get it here. So I have an example for you here of a mural board that was created to a mural board, sorry. A mural board that was created by a group of designers in Amsterdam to provide a world to inhabit. And I would give you this as an early example of a speculative design prototype that in this case is also an example of user experience design. It's a place to inhabit, a place that the designers who were gathering in this case for a conference were able to create a virtual world that that provided a lot of different wonderful possibilities. And I'll let the designers explain that to you because they'll do a much better job than me. As you're watching this, keep in mind what I was mentioning earlier, that design is important, but in the context of art and design for living systems, it's only part of the picture. However, as artists, I believe we can use some of these wonderful tools that have been developed for design practice. One of those is Miro, and we'll talk a bit more about Miro in a minute after you see how this very interesting Miro board works. And I want to be able to give you some ideas for how this can connect to specific forms of art making. So let's make this full screen and we'll watch this.
I will say today I'm here to share with you guys.
I'll pause it.
There's no audio currently with the video. And we can't hear you either. It's okay. Lost audio. This is a really great video. We'll drop it in the chat as well.
Did you hear audio in the previous minute or so?
No, because there was no embedded audio.
Okay, so.
But I think there's a way to speak over what they're sharing because I think it's such a rich description and methodology.
Right. Let me go ahead and just try to play the audio without the video for a second to see if you can hear it. Roxy, do we need to add my screen share as a microphone? Let's try that. Unmute this. Trying to play it now.
Yeah, what's really exciting about this is that this Miro board, these designers took it from just the way we typically use Miro, which is a new platform for anyone tuning in. It's a wonderful collaborative design tool, and they created a user experience. And so you can actually go through the different worlds and the different layers, and explore the work of this design group.
Let's see if we can hear it. I'm going to play it without the video just to begin with.
Great. Still feedbacking, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I'll narrate it and we'll present it in the link. Let's see. In order for me to narrate it, I think we'll need to shut off the stream audio here. Now I just muted it, and now I'll try to play it again.
And I can add it to the stream when you're ready, John. It's currently not on your stream sharing.
Right, because I'm just trying to get it working.
Yeah.
So we can
technical
see it.
emergence.
Exactly, see it and hear my.
One of our collaborators in the chat is saying that that StreamYard does have a share audio click button when you go to screen share, which I haven't seen in this program, but if you see it, it seems like that could be of benefit.
Yeah.
I love that, Susan. It's all about audience and the relationships. Well, we can't all be perfect in this digital world, doing our best, and really excited about sharing all of this. We're not on Zoom. This is a program called StreamYard. And so StreamYard allows for a slightly more curated version of how we stream online.
Okay, and now I will get my window up here, see if we can see that.
Voila.
And last little test here is to play it. Yeah, it's playing fine without any audio artifacts. Good. So if we can just make this full screen, and then we'll see if we can all watch it together. Trying again. So this is a system that uses spatial cues to help the viewers and participants organize themselves in the space more effectively. And you can see the Miro cursors operating as people are working in the space. Skipping forward a bit here in the playback, we can also see somebody presenting here in a window. So they are developing essentially a shared whiteboard that is a lot more than a whiteboard. It's a whole immersive environment on the screen that allows people to engage with aspects of, in this case, they're doing some design exercises to help connect some of these ideas to the visual representation. So let me take you now into a bit more information about how we might be able to use some of these ideas in our own projects. So I'll bring up this Miro board and we'll post this link for you. This is actually a Miro board that is free for you to use and modify as you wish to create for your own projects and ideas. And Miro says something went wrong. Let's try again, Miro. Waiting for Miro to load. Too bad. Trying again. So I'll sign in this time and see if it'll like it better. So this is how Miro adds the board to our team. So we have a team for my lab at UCI, a Miro team, which is essentially an invited group of people. Why is that Miro's taking so long to do all this? So it's still filling in, and I apologize for the delay. I think I know what's going on here. The computer I'm using for screen sharing is not as powerful as the one I usually use, and I think the combination of running Miro and running the StreamYard app is causing some difficulties.
And John,
Mm-hmm.
while this is loading, I'm not sure if the stream is also playing somewhere else in your computer, but it's playing back into the audio.
You're hearing an echo?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about now? Is there still an echo?
No.
No, I think we're good. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so there we go. So we have a version of the Amsterdam house that's available for you to fill in on your own and use as a base for other projects. And obviously, given that it's Miro, which is a real nice whiteboard environment, you can easily make changes to it. So I apologize for the technical glitches. I think we are just going to have to dispense with the screen share for this time around. And what we'll do instead is I'll discuss some of these ideas and would love to answer your questions and talk about things that that have come up for you as you've started to embrace this concept, these ideas of prototyping. So let me just get back to StreamYard here.
We have one question already.
Good.
Which is a baseline question, which I think is a really good fundamental to start with from Susan, which is what is meant by emergent media?
Great. Thanks, Susan. Emergent media, to me, is media that is on the cusp of being used for new purposes and new ideas. My Emergent Media DesignLab is investigating ways that we can use essentially the tools and techniques of the 21st century for art making and also connecting that with various aspects of design thinking. And our approach really then is to say these emergent media tools are the tools that are available to us, not just to use as is. In other words, we're not so much going in and using a tool like Final Cut Pro or Adobe After Effects, or even Miro for that matter, for the purposes for which they might have been originally intended, often for solving a design problem. But we want to use these tools to create art that is in and of the tool set itself, but then takes it further. So another way of thinking of all this is to think about the notion of the artist medium. And there's been discussion over the past 40 or 50 years in the new media art community about this notion of creating the medium or inventing the medium. And so emergent media art is what we're doing as we're inventing the media that we are using with that technology as a substrate or a base. So good question, Susan. Other questions, ideas, concepts, especially related to design. So Ruta asks, how do we differentiate speculative design and design? Speculative design is obviously an aspect of design. It's an area or an approach. But speculative design brings in new or additional concepts that sometimes aren't traditionally a part of the designer's tool set. Think about narrative, for example. It's very it's a well-trodden path for designers to use narrative as part of the design process. We write user stories. We ask people to tell us about their experience in a narrative way. First I did this, then I did this. Here's how I felt. Here's what I thought. Here's the next steps. Speculative design obviously uses all of those same approaches, but takes it one step further, maybe more into the realm of science fiction. Think of this idea of speculative narrative that not only tries to predict what might happen in the future, but really more importantly, to speculate about it, to look forward, to think about how these ideas might blossom and develop in a future context. So speculative design is partly the art of the possible, which is one way of thinking of design, but it's also partly the art of the impossible, or maybe the improbable, looking to where we might provide some opportunities for new thinking and new ideas based on these new concepts. So we're encouraging the participants in the Living Systems Collaboratory to use a speculative design approach to thinking about your prototype and how it might be developed over the next few weeks. Think about where this might go in the future, but then create something, create a narrative, a story, an interactive experience of some kind that takes us into that. And so often speculative design involves creating films or creating simulations of how things might work. It involves putting us together in a world that we can experience together. Let's loop back then a bit to this notion of experience design. Many people now are trained in the disciplines of user experience design or customer experience design, all really important concepts and ideas. But then let's think about how we might connect that to the notion of art making, and especially the ideas that I mentioned earlier regarding art making and critical approaches to art making being not so much about illustrating or solving a problem or communicating an idea, but really about exploring a whole theme or constellation of possible scenarios. So as artists, we are, in some sense, inventing the future. as speculative designers, we are telling stories or providing experiences that allow the future or these future ideas to be experienced. And what we're hoping, what we're inviting is for the participants in the Living Systems Collaboratory to meld those, put those ideas together a bit. Think of yourself, yes, as a designer, yes, as an artist, but also as a designer working in this speculative, narrative-driven, almost kind of future fiction-oriented notion. Science fiction, yes, but not just science fiction that's concerned with technology, but science fiction that's concerned with the human experience and how we grow and evolve. So looping this back to the overall mission and direction of the Buckminster Fuller Institute, it's clear that Bucky was always a speculative designer, and those ideas that the design ideas and practices that he evolved and that we're still exploring in some of these venues really set the root or the base for thinking about speculative design as a discipline. But we're now in a world where we can actually create a lot of these ideas. We can manifest these ideas in the world. If we, however, simply manifest them as devices or tools or approaches to solve problems, I think we're shortchanging ourselves as artists, because, of course, artists are able in some way to respond to an intuitive, a hidden, a gestalt, a hidden drive, a gestalt that can't necessarily be put into words in a design brief. Okay, I've talked a lot, and there have been quite a few questions and comments popping up. Roxy, do you want to bring us back to one of them? Good question from Kiki. What are the ideal phases of prototyping for speculative design, and what are the parameters to successfully prototype? Well, I think one nice model is a three-phase approach: incubating an idea, prototyping the idea, and then presenting the idea in a broader public context. And as the people involved in the Living Systems Collaboratory are well aware, that three-phase model is exactly what we're following. The incubation is not so much about trying to find, as I've mentioned earlier, a problem statement or design brief. It's really about finding that seed inside you, the thing that you really have to say as an artist. Prototyping, then, in this prototyping process, we're applying tools to create malleable, easily modified representations or presentations or abilities to interact with that idea, which is why we think Miro is such a fruitful presentation tool and development tool for some of these ideas. And then moving forward, we're going to be encouraging you to actually create artifacts that will live in the world independently of your project. Works of art, essentially, that can be out there, exhibited, presented, and of course, presented with you as part of them as Living Systems participants, but also perhaps can live on their own in a way that might extend the reach of this whole concept. Other questions? So Illyria asks a great question. How do you measure the impact of a prototype in the context of a living systems framework? And I would invite us to embrace that question, but think about it in a context that maybe is driven more by how artwork is judged for its success or its impact. Art, of course, is one of the central areas of study for this whole field of aesthetics. And aesthetics really is, in very simple terms, sorry, I'm oversimplifying, but aesthetics is really the discipline of making value judgments about a particular human artifact, something that's been made by people for the purpose of art, whatever art might be, how you might define it. Some people say that in order to make effective judgments about aesthetics, you must be informed, and it's really only the critical, informed judgment that can drive aesthetics. Other people say, well, really, it's only the popular view, only if your work is widely seen and widely recognized by people who aren't trained in aesthetics, then it's successful. Other people say, well, it's the art world, it's this group of people who, loosely defined group of people and institutions like galleries and theaters and presenters and critics that define the success aesthetically of a work of art. And so I'm sorry to not be directly answering the question about how we measure this. I'm really posing now a set of new questions that we can consider. I would advocate for us evaluating the success or the strength of the project coming out of the Living Systems Collaboratory, really from a framework of aesthetics as opposed to a framework of efficacy. And we'll have more to talk about over the next few weeks in that regard too. Good question though, really opens up a wide area for discussion. This is now a question about how I structure my prototyping process and how, in cases where I'm, consulting or mentoring, advising students, or working with the team, I prefer to see things structured. This is my approach. Evolved through a series of kind of intuitive discussions with others, also informed by making lots of mistakes and redoing things many, many times. So one of the key aspects of prototyping, in my view of the world, is the concept of iteration. And for those of you who are trained in experience design or other areas of design thinking, you'll know that iteration, of course, is really a central aspect of this. Iteration is sometimes not as widely recognized in the art field. Sometimes artists are trained in, going back to various kinds of design approaches, might almost be seen as a waterfall model where, the first thing is done and then the second thing is done and then the third thing is done and then it's finally delivered. An iterative approach, on the other hand, is cyclical. It is oriented towards finding aspects of the art or the artistic idea that can be explored quickly at first and providing progressive levels of, circling my fingers here, right? It's progressive levels of exploration. The iteration is one of the key aspects of this. Another aspect of it is being able to have something to show, something to demonstrate, something to present as early as possible in the process, even if it's not fully working yet. And that can be a little bit risky. Sometimes, especially if we're working with emergent media technology, things don't work. We're working with beta versions. We're working with early flaky versions of technology. And the easiest thing in the world to do is work with a piece of technology that's known and proven. It really reduces the risk. I'm advocating that we take the opposite approach, that rather than working in this model of risk management, reducing the possibilities for failure, that we work in this model that we've heard described earlier as asset management or asset exploration, where we're finding new things, finding out new possibilities about the tools and the techniques that we have available to us. So, one example of that is today's presentation. I chose, as an artist who likes to explore and use new technologies, I chose today to use camera that I hadn't used before. It's an environment that I was hoping to test before we made the connection on StreamYard today, but unfortunately was not able to do so. But I discovered a lot about using it and already have some new ideas about how to put that into play. So I'm inviting you to find ways of connecting with your media or medium, whatever it or they might be, and push the limits of those things in a prototyping context. The nice thing about prototyping is that it's low stakes in the sense that failure is an option. And as a matter of fact, failure is a desired outcome because it's by not doing exactly what you wanted to do that you can learn how to do things more. So iteration, low stakes, and then also kind of moving from a notion of lower to higher fidelity over the iterative process. And what we mean by fidelity, of course, is the way that the prototype itself will connect with the vision or the feeling or the intuition that you had when you as an artist initially started to germinate this concept. So progressively higher fidelity prototyping takes us from the kind of rough exploration where not much works to progressively refined iteration where more and more things work, but they work in a broader and more open scale. And one other thing I'd like to mention about prototyping in this context is think of how you would define the term prototype. Take a minute now. What to you is the definition of the term prototype if I was to ask you to write that down? One possible definition of the term prototype is that it's a working model, something that isn't the final product, but it's something that lets you explore some aspects of that. Another definition of a prototype is it's something that's developed as a template, which in a sense is a model, a thing from which other things that are similar will be created. Another way of thinking of the term prototype is that it's the instantiation of what you would like to see if you could really do everything you wanted to do, and maybe you aren't fully implementing every part of it. For example, maybe a lot of it is ends up being 2D images in Miro that are slightly navigable, but maybe there's some aspect of it then that turns into something fully navigable. And the Amsterdam house is a great example of that, where you can see some aspects of it, of going into that house, that are fairly low fidelity, some aspects that are more interactive and higher fidelity, and then some aspects of it that feel almost like being in a presentation room, even higher fidelity. So I invite you, as you start thinking about approaches to prototyping, to investigate the Amsterdam room, not just as a Miro template that you might be able to use, but as a place where different levels of prototyping are explored. So I think maybe we have time for one or two more quick questions. Living systems principles influencing design. I already mentioned one of them, this idea that rather than looking at risk management, we're looking at exploration of assets. Also, the fractal nature of living systems design is super important in this context, where every fragment somehow represents or contains the part or contains the whole thing. Each part contains the whole thing. And perhaps the most important one that I'd like to start to explore in the context of the Living Systems Collaboratory is this commitment to physical embodiment of the concepts and ideas. We're not simply, pushing pixels on a screen. We're not simply moving game pieces around on a board. We're not simply sitting and having a discussion where it's a kind of an auditory or simply visual connection between people and ideas. We're really finding ways that those become fully embodied in our concept and our approaches. And Lisa's comment here is right on point, looking at the etymology, saying pro is in favor of, type is a particular type of thing. So prototyping seems to be the experience of being in favor of, or providing space, providing room for something that is in the process of becoming. And isn't that really a big aspect of the whole living systems approach, that it's not about being there, it's about the process of becoming. And as Casey says, spontaneous holographic model iteration. So we need to wrap up to allow time for a quick break. And then we'll be moving into another session with our participants in the Living Systems Collaboratory. So this is the end of the recorded part of the talk that'll be streamed online. Hope people have found it useful. And we'll continue this discussion in another presentation, another meeting session very soon. I'll be iterating my devices here and moving towards the next stage of presenting this in a more fully evolved way. So thanks everyone for your time. We've really appreciated being able to be with you today. And Roxy, anything to add as we move into the next phase?
Just for anyone who's not a part of the Collaboratory and any of this is new to you, some simple frameworks for moving into rapid prototyping. Would recommend checking out IDEO. They have some really good rapid prototyping frameworks, including just giving yourself space to brainstorm and let yourself just encourage wild ideas and give yourself space to really think big and dream big. And then from there, pick one or two and then do that again and really give yourself the creative freedom to not have the bounds of what's probable or what's possible, but just kind of feel into what's the seed that's inside of you. And then take that wherever you get to from that. And then actually, like John said, try to test it, iterate, figure out not only what's the big dream and what's the gap between where you are and where you need to be, and what is the capacity that you get to build with your fellow comrades on Spaceship Earth and potential collaborators. But what resources do you have now? Do you have a way to wireframe it? Do you have a way to help tell the story of the potential impact? Because if there's a way that people can have an embodied experience of seeing through your eyes into what you see as possible, then it's going to become easier for you to kind of move towards that. But if you wait until the end and you think that it's the right way and you don't go through this iteration process, often you're robbing yourself of the potential of collaboration, if nothing more than receiving feedback of how it's actually received. Another thing that I think, one of the edges between, I think, what IDEO presented, which is a lot about human-centered design, and we're shifting into life-centered design. So how are we designing for all life and not just humans? But I think a core tenet to that regardless is empathy. And so really taking the time to do empathy exercises for who you're creating for, so that you can iterate along the way. So prototyping.
Great insights. Thanks, Roxy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really glad we're talking about that today, and thank you all. And we're hopeful that you stay along for the ride.
So for the Living Systems Collaboratory participants, we'll be reconvening after a short break. What do you think, Roxy? 5 minutes?
Yeah, 5 minutes is great.
And are we meeting here or are we meeting in Zoom?
We are meeting in Zoom.
Everyone has the link?
Everyone has the link.
You should. Okay. So thanks again, everybody. It's been great being with you, and to be continued.
To be continued. And for anyone who tuned in, we'd love for you to stay along for the ride. So in the comments now, we're going to just drop the link for joining and being in touch. And for everyone else, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.